Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and today I wanted to talk about a fish that gets a bad rap sometimes, and that is the red-tailed shark. We recently rescaped our 75-gallon in the other side of the fish room, and a lot of people noticed the red-tailed shark, noticed how large it was, noticed the awesome colors, so I want to talk a little bit more about it, so stay tuned. So this is the 75-gallon that houses our red-tailed shark, a Paleorhynchus bicolor, and we've had this fish now for about 4 or 5 years, and it's relatively full-grown at about 6 inches or so. The red-tailed shark comes from the waters of Thailand. The waters are generally clear, although they are also found in some rather shallow ponds. Now, here we have a 75-gallon setup, and the water is a little bit darker because of all the driftwood, so we are getting some tannins in the water as well. Now, these fish generally like a pH that's right around neutral. Our pH tends to be a little bit higher, although in this tank with all the driftwood, it's hovering right around a 7.4 or so. Temperatures, relatively easy to keep. They enjoy typical freshwater tropical fish temperatures, somewhere in the upper 70s, and so this tank is usually right around 78 degrees. And we've had no issues keeping the red-tailed shark at those temperatures and with that pH. Now, in terms of size, this is a full-grown red-tailed shark at about 6 inches or so. Usually when you find them at a pet store, they're going to be small and cute and probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 to 1.5 inches. And I think what attracts a lot of people is their coloration. They've got a really, really dark blue, almost black body, and then of course they've got that red tail. There are also albino varieties where the body is white instead of a very dark blue or black. So the coloration is definitely cool. And of course, it's called the red-tailed shark, and so people like that. But really, it's a cyprinid, and so it's related more to carp. And I guess it wouldn't be really a great selling point if you said it was a red-tailed carp, but this is essentially what it is. So coloration is totally awesome. I think the problems that arise is when we talk about temperament. This is an aggressive fish, period. I have never had a red-tailed shark that wasn't aggressive. I've had these fish for a number of years. This isn't the only one I've kept. And it really comes down to how you set up your tank. And so I have had red-tailed sharks, and as you can see here, these fish are not going to be easily bullied. And so we've got a large green severum who actually runs that tank. We've got a large heckelei. We've got a leaf tinapoma. And those fish, like I said, they're not easily bullied, and so the red-tailed shark doesn't really chase them around, nor would he be able to. We also have a pearl gourami, and a lot of the larger gouramis can be on the relatively boisterous side, so they're not easily bullied as well. And then, of course, you see here, we also have some Geophagus steindachteri. And I would say the fish that, if he chases fish in this tank, it's going to be the black skirt tetras. We've got a couple keyhole cichlids that are in here, and sometimes he will chase them. But the other fish he generally leaves alone, and for the most part, we haven't had any issues. I have had red-tailed sharks in with some African cichlids, and that's worked out okay as well. But in terms of tank mates, one of the things that you really have to watch out for is, I would say, any peaceful tropical community fish is probably going to be a target. So things like guppies and platies, even swordtails, which can be sometimes a little bit aggressive, but slower moving fish, angelfish even, red-tailed sharks may very well start to bully them. And when they harass fish, they really go after them. They can swim pretty quick for short bursts of time. So if you're going to keep them with smaller fish, I would probably mimic closer to what I've done here. Larger fish like maybe the Buenos Aires tetra. These black skirt tetras have worked out pretty well. Colombian Tetras, something that's going to be very fast moving, something that's not going to be chased down, and it's going to be a little bit harder to bully. Or go with something a little bit larger and somewhat aggressive, like severums, or what we see here, you got the Geophagus. Those fish, again, not easily bullied. I've kept them with some African cichlids, some haps, and some peacocks, and that's worked out just fine as well. You're going to want to make sure you have a backup plan for this fish. I've mentioned this in a number of videos when dealing with African cichlids, but this is a fish, when they're small, they're not overly aggressive, and might lead somebody to believe like, okay, this is going to be okay. It's working out fine. I don't understand what everybody's talking about. And then somewhere when they get around that 3 or 4 inch size, at least in my experience, that's when they really start to assert themselves in the tank and be a whole lot less communal. And so you just have to be watching out for that. In terms of tank size, this is a 75 gallon. I can't imagine keeping this fish in anything smaller. I suppose maybe a 55 gallon if it were set up correctly, but anything smaller than that, if you've got fish that it feels it can bully, those fish have nowhere to go in a smaller tank. If you can deal with the aggressiveness issues, they're not really hard to care for. Like I mentioned before, water temperature, all the water parameters are pretty much what you would find in most tropical fish. Feeding the fish is not difficult. They eat flake foods, sinking pellets. They will eat frozen brine shrimp and bloodworms. And they will occasionally graze on algae. You'll see them grazing the sides of the structures inside of a tank. They're not going to necessarily be an algae eater per se, where you're going to notice a major difference in algae quantity in a tank, but they do graze on algae as well. On the decorations, the red-tailed shark, especially when younger, I think it appreciates some places to hide, maybe some caves or some rock work. You can see this one is out and about, and it really is almost all the time. But there are red-tailed sharks that we've had that really just like to hide, especially when the lights are on, so giving it a place to do that would certainly be a good idea. Breeding, things get tricky. They can be bred, but they're usually not bred in a home aquarium. When they are bred in Asia, it's usually because they are including hormones in that process. And so it's relatively difficult to breed. And the other issue is you really should only have one in a tank. I know you go to the pet store, you might see 20 or 30 in a 20-gallon tank and think, okay, well, I can get 3 or 4 and they'll be fine. It's probably not going to be fine unless you have a really large tank or a lot of hiding places or get really lucky. But for the most part, if you have more than one red-tailed shark in a tank, chances are only one of them is going to survive. So, again, the breeding side of it, I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on because it is rather difficult. It's just a lot easier just to go get one from a store. So, when we're looking at this fish, there are some positive aspects. It looks really nice. And again, the lighting here doesn't necessarily show off the colors as well as it should, but that dark blue, almost black body with that red tail fin is really something to look at. But there are a lot of challenges, and I would highly encourage you to really think about purchasing this fish before you do. Do you really have the right setup? Do you have a large enough tank? I'm a strong believer anything less than a 55, and I think that's pushing anything less, and you don't really give a chance for the other fish to get out of its way if the red-tailed shark starts to bully. Have a backup plan. Again, it's a great fish, but the aggression issues are there. They are real, and you're best off keeping this fish either with really fast fish like we see with the tetras, or something like the green cerebrum that's coming into the picture, and something that's a little bit more aggressive that's not going to get bullied. All right, everybody, so that is the red-tailed shark. There are some definite challenges when keeping that fish, but there's also some really nice rewards. If it's in the right environment, it's a great fish, but that right environment can be tricky. So if you like this video, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.